All right, continuing on with introduction into the sciences of the Quran, and we starting with chapter 4. And this is about how the Quran was preserved and how it was compiled, right? Preservation and compilation. So the Quran is the only revealed scripture that has been guaranteed protection by Allah. Allah Ta'ala himself took the responsibility of preserving the Quran. He says, "Indeed, it is we who sent down the remembrance, and indeed we will be its guardian." Allah Ta'ala has promised to protect the Quran from any distortions, discrepancies, and additions or deletions. Through this divine protection, the words of the Quran today are the exact same words that were revealed to Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. The care and attention to minute details given in the preservation and compilation of the Quran is unparalleled. The preservation and compilation of the Quran passed through 3 unique stages. The first was during the life of the Prophet alayhi salam. The second was during the time of Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him. And the third was during the Khalifa of Uthman, may Allah be pleased with him. So the era of the Prophet. During the life of the Prophet alayhi salam, the Quran was primarily preserved in 2 ways: orally through memorization, and 2, writing. Right? So orally, the primary method of preservation and memorization, the Arabs of the pre-Islamic era were mostly an illiterate nation. However, it is important to understand that literacy does not mean non-intelligent. It simply refers to the fact that reading and writing were not common. Despite their inability to read and write, they were extremely eloquent and creative when it came to speech and poetry. What they lacked in terms of reading and writing was made up through their eloquence. And not to just really prolong it, or to just go through it, we can kind of skip through this because we understand orally how it was preserved, right? So their ability to memorize was enhanced, right? So being that the Arabs already had a very strong oral tradition, preserving stories and different things, poetries, some of the poetry was actually teaching. That's why, like, even right now, you have like poems by Ibn Taymiyyah. They refer to them as poems. In America, to us, a poem is some type of something that rhymes, almost like a rap with no beat. But you have like 1,000 lines of poetry on fiqh, which describes all the terminology, the details of fiqh. You have some with on hadith, break down certain sciences, what's a weak isnad. So they already had a very strong oral tradition of preserving things, stories, wakada. So this also is why when the Rasul was reciting the Quran, and it was so beautiful and eloquent, if you notice, some of the early surahs, this is how they say you could tell the difference between Mecca and Medina surahs. Some of the surahs, they rhyme. So that's why they used to say to the Rasul, you know, like, what kind of poetry is this? So like, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman Nir-Rahim, it rhymes. If you go through the whole thing, you'll see that it rhymes. So and then the way they was reciting with such beauty and eloquence. So they already had this in their culture. So it made it easy for them to preserve the Quran in the same fashion. So the Arabs had a very strong oral tradition of poetry and storytelling that enhanced their ability to memorize. It is no surprise that when revelation started coming to the Prophet ﷺ, his companions would commit those verses to their memory. The Rasul was the first one to commit it to memory. He couldn't read or write. So when it started getting written in his time, he had people who scribed for him. Right? Alhamdulillah. I'm getting ahead of myself because now the book is starting to say exactly what I just said. The Prophet ﷺ was the first to memorize the verses of the Quran. Initially, when he received revelation, he would hastily repeat after Jibreel. So if you remember in some of the first lessons when I was saying when Jibreel pressed him in the cave and he told him to read and he said, I can't read. And I asked the question, did the Rasul just start reading itself, or did Jibreel say it? And when you look at the hadiths and different things on it, you would notice that Jibreel said it and then the Rasul repeated after him. A lot of us been taught, like the Rasul said, I can't read, I don't know how to recite. And then all of a sudden he just started blurting out. That's kind of the message we have been given. Because unfortunately, a lot of us are educated by people who haven't been educated. Or they may have listened to somebody talk about something, right? But their understanding was never tested. They never took a test to see if they could pass or fail the information that was given to them. So like it says, initially, when he received revelation, wahi, he would hastily repeat after Jibreel, may Allah be pleased with him, to ensure that he would memorize the verses. So he's repeating after Jibreel. Now, we also know that every year during Ramadan, twice in a particular year, the angel Jibreel would come down and go over the Quran with the Rasul. You have to understand, the year before, we got to keep in mind the way that the Quran was revealed over a course of years. So the next year when he came down, there was some verses and different things in there that wasn't in there the year before. So when he came down to go over it with him, and it was also to make sure that his understanding was correct. But we can't forget the time period. After the first couple of verses, 3 years passed with nothing coming down. So we got to keep in mind that the angel Jibreel would come down and go over the verses with him during Ramadan to make sure that everything was correct. And this is still some of the same method of, this is just the only difference, but it's due to the language and our understanding. We sit with somebody and listen to them recite, or they'll have us read, and then they try to get us to recite similar to the way that they recite, the person that we sitting with. And sometimes, we won't go into that. But this was how it started. This was something that the Rasul used to do with the angel Jibreel. But his understanding was checked to make sure. So the Rasul was taught the Quran by the angel Jibreel, how to implement it, how to understand it. So those are some things that we need to keep in mind. And especially when you go into the hadiths about the day was going to come when recitation is going to be more common than acting up on it. So like right now, You can have individuals who quick to jump up and start reciting because they feel like they good at it or they feel like they beautiful at it. But implementation, you know what I'm saying? And I speak on it because it was hadith that this day was going to come. A lot of people focus on memorization and reciting, which I mean, alhamdulillah, that's not a bad thing. But implementation, what's going to get you into Jannah? Being able to recite and not act up on the Quran, or being able to act up on the Quran and you don't really focus on recitation. When you look at the hadiths that speak about this, you know what I'm saying? Individuals, we should have a balance, because the way they taught it, they learned the Quran. When you go into the athars, they will learn like 10 ayats at a time with the tafsir. Not the tafsir. We talking about the tafsir, not this is what it said. They learned the tafsir with the ayat, so that they completely understood it, so that they was able to sit down with a person and teach it the same way early. So as it was said though, the Rasul, he would do this with the angel Jibril to ensure that he would memorize the verses, understand the verses, and be able to implement them properly. And Allah Ta'ala reassured him, do not move your tongue with haste to recite it. It is for us to collect it and give you the ability to recite it. Alhamdulillah. And you can find this hadith in Sahih Bukhari, right? Allah Ta'ala assured the Prophet alayhi salam that the words of the Quran would be preserved in his heart as soon as they were revealed. The Prophet alayhi salam was constantly engaged in memorizing, teaching, recording, and explaining the Quran, teaching tafsirs and explaining. So memorizing, teaching, recording, and explaining the Quran, giving tafsirs of the Quran. So this is letting you know, all of this comes along with learning and memorizing the Quran. Of course, you know, in our day of time, the same type of pressure possibly shouldn't be put on everybody, because memorizing and sounding good has become top tier. You know what I'm saying? You look at, because we speak on minhaj, right? Methodology. Look at the minhaj of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Look at the minhaj of the Salaf. If this was the Rasul minhaj, this was the minhaj of the Salaf. So they made sure when you sat with them to learn Quran and memorize it, they taught you the tafsirs. They explained it to you. Right? What happened to that? What happened to that minhaj? What happened to that methodology? What happened to that methodology? Now, all you hear is tajweed. I'm working on my tajweed. I'm working on the tanweens. Alhamdulillah. Is y'all working on tafsirs? Tajweed. The tajweed rules. I'm sitting with somebody, they teaching me tajweed. And then you would ask them, what's this tajweed rule? I don't know. I thought you was learning tajweed. No, well, how you learning tajweed? Well, I'll read to my teacher and they'll tell me that sounds right. Do you know the Tajweed rules? No, I don't know the Tajweed rules. I just know my teachers reciting said, repeat after me. What are you learning? You learning Hafs? You learning Ibn Kathir? Like, what are you learning? I'm learning Quran with Tajweed. Y'all do any tafsirs at all? What I'm gonna do tafsir for? I don't even know what I'm reciting. I can't even tell you what I'm reciting in a language that I speak. And I'm saying that because this has become the methodology for people who speak Spanish, whatever language you speaking from the Asian continent. You know what I'm saying? Whatever that is. And then some of us who speak English. Especially us who say we up on the minhaj of the Salaf as-Salih. What happened to that minhaj? So anyway, as it says, not only did the Prophet alayhi salam memorize the Quran, but he also encouraged his companions to memorize and teach it as well. Do y'all think all this teaching means reciting? That they was only teaching what we call today tajweed or tajweed? Because that's what memorizing and teaching the Quran means in today's time. Do you think that's what that was? That meant? That he encouraged them, his companions, to memorize and teach tajweed? Or was they teaching them the Quran, how to implement it and act up on it as they memorized it? Were they memorizing it for the purposes of, I know 50 surahs, I know 30 surahs, I done memorized the whole Jews? No, they was memorizing it for being, so that the Quran, that the book of Allah, could be preserved, so that they could pass it on, the teachings, how to implement it, not just so that they could sit around and say, I got 9 Jews, I got 8 Jews. You know Baqarah? I got 20 ayats of Baqarah. What we do in today's time? How my man them said, y'all off the minhaj. You off the minhaj. You know what I'm saying? Not in the methodology of kicking people off the minhaj, but you just might be off the minhaj. So but I'm saying not to be a critic. I'm just bringing it into the point because this chapter is about how it was preserved and how it was compiled. Are you memorizing Quran for the purposes so that it will be preserved, or so that you can sit around and I got 30 Jews, I got 10 Jews? But the implementation, when you sit down, let's say you don't memorize, you don't have a lot memorized. How many parents sit down and teach their kid Quran? If you sit down and say, you ask the average parent, do you have Quran classes with your kid? They're gonna say, yeah, we have a daily Quran class. You teach them Quran? Yeah, I teach my kids Quran. What is that going to consist of? Them going to YouTube or some type of app, listening to a reciter, were they really learning from the reciter that they listening to? They may have Alif Ba Ta, so they learning, they know how to connect it, so they're listening to somebody from YouTube. And this is not a knock against that. This is proving a point. about the minhaj, the methodology of learning the Quran. So they're going through that, and then they're learning how to so-called recite. That's not a Quran class. If nothing else, you could possibly consider that a form of tajweed class. A Quran class would be you sitting down with your kid reading tafsirs of ayats. Asking them a question. If you're in a situation and you do this and this and this, what does the Quran say you're supposed to do? Because what do it mean if you can recite 19 surahs from the Quran, but you in a situation that tells you what to do out of the 19 surahs that you have memorized, the 29, you got the 30 of Jews memorized, and the answer that you need to the question of what you need to be doing in a particular situation is in 4 of those surahs, and you don't know what to do. You're not in a Quran class. You don't even really know how the Quran was preserved, how it was compiled, why was it put in the order that it's put in. This is a Quran class. Well, I won't say class because there's no tests, homeworks. I won't call it a lecture, but this is the going through a book that would be in a Quran class. You think if you go to one of the universities and they be like, oh man, they got some Quran classes over there, and you go to a Quran class, you think in the university we talking about, and they have a Quran class in the university, you think it's just going to be about tajweed? Nah. It's going to be about the fiqh, the correct understanding of how this Quran should be implemented and practiced on in your everyday life. Not how you sound reciting stuff that you don't even understand. That's not a Quran class. We gotta be real with ourselves, man. We gotta be real with ourselves. We can't turn this deen into something that we don't want it to be. I mean, we can't turn it into something that we want it to be, because the way it really is, we look bad when it comes to what Islam really is. As a ummah, we look horrible. But it said the day was gonna come. We gonna be like the scum that's floating on the ocean, just worthless, don't even have any direction or control where we gonna end up at. We just scum floating on water. Wherever it takes us, we go. Just worthless, sophisticated trash, if we gonna be honest with ourselves. And it's because we fooling ourselves, man. We fooling ourselves. You're not having Quran classes in your home, man. Now, if you want to call it tajweed, you could call it tajweed. But Quran, no. So like as it's saying, now check it out. Not only did the Prophet alayhi salam memorize the Quran, teach the Quran, explain the Quran, which is the tafsir, right? But he also encouraged his companions to memorize, teach, and explain the Quran as well. Through his words, he will offer incentives and encouragement for teaching and memorizing. Those two different things. Not teaching how to memorize it, but teaching what the Quran is about. Teaching and memorizing. Not just memorizing and not teaching or speaking on how it should be implemented at all. Right? For example, the Prophet alayhi salam said, The best among you are those who learn the Quran and teach it. You know what that means to us? You know what that means to us? Who teach you how to recite. The best of us are those who go and learn how to recite the Quran and then teach somebody else how to recite it. With no implementation, no understanding. Why do that make any sense to us? Why do that make any sense to us? That's why, like right now, I'm a wakil. And I help people get married. Wallahi, I done married a few people. I done did several nikahs, right? Sit downs. And I'm seeing a phenomenon of sisters marrying brothers because they could recite. But I know, listening to them recite, if they sit down in a Quran class with a person who went to school that has a doctorate, you have people who have real doctorates in recitations of the Quran, right? Not somebody who lives overseas and was taught by his parents that was taught by his parents, and you can pay them a couple of bucks to come sit at their house and learn from them in India and Egypt. If you sit in a real Quran class or with one of them scholars, that individual is going to get corrected. Starting with the A'udhu Billah. It happened to me. But because this phenomenon of how a person sounds, they feel like beautifying the Quran means the tone of your voice. You could be tearing tajweed completely up, but if you sound beautiful with a mellow tone, sisters will marry you. Sisters will marry you. And then when they get behind closed doors and they be horrible and he be horrible, now I'm sitting down between two individuals trying to mend things and telling them, y'all need to start to practice Quran and Sunnah, man. The Quran tells you, man, if you deal with things a certain way, your spouse is going to become a fitna for you. I don't want to hear that. You married him because he could recite. You married him because you thought he was going to teach you some Arabic. Did y'all even see what deen was like? Do you even know enough deen to know if a person deen isn't correct? Did you investigate them enough to see, is they a Kareem? Is they sitting in a circle of Kareems? That's not the minhaj of the Salaf as-Salih. That's not the methodology. So as I continue on, through his words, he will offer incentives and encouragements for teaching and memorizing. For example, the Prophet alayhi salam said, the best amongst you are those who learn the Quran and teach it. In another statement, alayhi salam said, whoever reads a letter from the book of Allah, then for them is a good deed. A good deed is multiplied by 10. I am not saying that Alif, Lam, Mim is one letter, but Alif is a letter, Lam is a letter, and Mim is a letter. As a result of this encouragement, there were hundreds of companions who committed the entire Quran to memory. For example, approximately 7 Hufaz alone were martyred during the battle of Bir Ma'imah. These companions in turn were engaged in teaching and spreading the Quran through their efforts. The Quran spread throughout the Muslim lands and has been preserved in the chests of the Muslims from generation to generation until today. Now let me pull up one hadith real quick. Bithni Allah Ta'ala. Okay, and I want to use the hadith that's in Sunan Ibn Majah. Right? Ibn Majah don't really get as much play as it should. I love the hadiths in Sunan Ibn Majah. So now just to touch the point on acting up on the Quran. I'm not trying to say don't memorize, and I'm not trying to say people shouldn't do what they're doing. I'm not knocking it, but we can't elevate what we doing above what should be done, especially for the purposes of feeling like we making ourselves sound better than what we are. Just ask yourself, what is a Quran class in your house with you and your children? What's a Quran class with you and your companions? Does it involve the explaining of it, which is we know is tafsirs? Does it involve reading it to get an understanding, or does it involve sitting around listening to somebody through YouTube or an app and then trying to make yourself sound the best like them and possibly following along with the Arabic and repeating each other? Is that a Quran class? Is that what you call a Quran class? Because like we saying, let's look at the minhaj. That's not from the minhaj of the Salaf. So look at this hadith. It was narrated, and this hadith is also in Bukhari, Muslim, Dawood, Tirmidhi, and Nasa'i. So this is in different versions, because it's a very long hadith. So some of them just break down certain paragraphs out of it and put them in different sections to get different rulings out of the hadith. But this showing the implementation of Islam, the Quran, right? So look what it says, right? It was narrated that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, may Allah be pleased with him, said, the Messenger of Allah, alayhi salam, said, at the end of time, there will appear a people, and they use the word new teeth, as in saying they will be young in age. Some translations, and when you dig into the Arabic, it's basically saying that they're going, because they don't want you to exclude older people. They might be older, but they're new to the deen. So it says their maturity, their mental maturity is young. So we don't want you to think young people like little kids, but you might be 40-something years old, but new to Islam. Like you unfortunately, you could be Muslim for 20 years and then get introduced to real Islam your 20th year of being Muslim. So you got to keep it in the mindset of they really maturely, intellectually don't understand the implementation of this deen, is what they getting at. But they think that they is the upper echelons because this is what they tell themselves, right? So, and then it's not saying the very, very end times. It go through some of the explanations that what meant by the end times is basically the end of the good times of the deen. So coming around the 4th, 5th, 6th generations. But We know this because we started to see it with the Khawarij. The Khawarij fit this description perfectly, right? So it says, they will appear a people with new teeth, with foolish minds. They will speak the best words ever uttered by mankind. They're going to sound good. They're going to sound mesmerizing. You know why though? Because knowledge will be lost. They're going to talk to people that don't know that they don't know what they're talking about. Why? Because implementation of Quran al-Kareem is being lost. Implementation of the Sunnah is being lost. Right? They will speak the best words ever uttered by mankind, and they will recite the Quran. Not in a speech. I got 30 surahs. I got a whole juz. But can't Islamically solve a problem where you got 30 surahs, it's at least 30 answers in all 30 of them surahs. Right? You got 30 answers to one problem and can't solve it Islamically. But you got 30 surahs. Right? So look, they will recite the Quran, but it will not go any deeper than their collarbones. Right? So look, some of the Taqreej is basically saying they're going to be innovating a religion, but they not going to know they innovating a religion. Just like, let's say you practice Islam with the understanding that the Salaf had. You on the minhaj, but you don't implement no Quran. You've been busied with trivial issues, and the Quran and implementing has been put on the back burner. But memorizing is put at the forefront in a contest to see who can get the most jewels done. That's not from the minhaj. When you consider that to be an innovation to the minhaj of the Salaf Salih, you done brought a new way. You done brought a bid'ah to the minhaj. See, because a lot of us don't understand the term bid'ah. Okay, you may have not brought a bid'ah to the religion, but you've definitely brought some bid'ah to the minhaj. So like it says, right? They innovate in the religion, be in belief and actions. Right? Because this is a sign of their lack of understanding or stupidity. Their ignorance, the lack of intellect or stupidity. In other words, only a person who either has no understanding of religion or considers it imperfect. Like the minhaj wasn't perfect, so we got to perfect the minhaj. Although we up on the minhaj that they had, let us perfect it. So they consider it imperfect and add their own things into it, feeling like they making it better. So they think it's imperfect and incomplete, indulge in these such acts. How on earth do memorization, since when does a Quran class become about tajweed? Not saying it doesn't have a place, but how you leaving out reading and understanding the Quran? How you leaving out tafsirs? Right? So it also goes on to say the Quran not going any deeper than the people's collarbones would either mean that they would repeat the Quran by the tongues, but it will not create any effect upon them. It ain't gonna change their life. It ain't gonna make them any better. But they're reciting. They're reciting words that they don't even know what they're reciting. Or that they will be denied the true understanding of it. Because something going on with them where they got a disease in their heart. And that disease is being increased. An ayah from the Quran, right? So it's some more talk reads, and I won't touch on it. But this right here is saying if the Rasul is giving hadiths that's saying eventually people are going to focus more on reciting the Quran and not acting up on it, lest you know that's not how they was teaching it. That's not the minhaj. That's not the purpose. That's not what they was doing. Because if it was how it was supposed to go, the Rasul never would have warned against it. In fact, the end of this hadith, which I was trying to leave off, it really says, whoever meets them, then get busy on them, man. Whoever meets them, get busy on them. And look, and for getting busy on them will bring a reward from Allah to those that get busy on those type of individuals. But in today's time, you can't get busy on them because this has become the new minhaj of Islam. And you really are finding it amongst a whole lot of young people. In fact, alhamdulillah, not a knock to it, but in fact, overseas and other places, memorizing it, the Arabic, not the understanding of it, they start this sometimes before they even reach elementary school. You can see some of them Hafiz of the Quran 3rd, 4th grade. But where's the tafsir class in elementary? I've met individuals who parents been Hafiz. They was learning to be Hafiz so that they can recite when Ramadan came, so that they can get the job for being a reciter, so that they can get the reward for repeating a letter. But if you gave them $1 million to practice Quran and Sunnah correctly, they wouldn't be able to get it. They wouldn't be able to get it. This minhaj, this phenomenon, I done seen, like, real talk. Where we at? You got foreigners that got all type of stores. Imagine that. You come into a store. An individual is 37 years old and he owns a store. He's been a Hafid since the age of 7. He's been a Hafid of the Quran for 30 years. And he's behind the counter selling pork, alcohol, fake weed, fake perks, fake powders to toot up your nose, porno videos, pistols. letting the little girls come through there with little clothes around 11 o'clock, taking them to the back, bumping them down for a fifth of Hennessy. They get them a fifth of Hennessy. They done came all up in the marketplace and did something strange with a person who been a Hafid of the Quran for 30 years for a bottle of Hennessy. And then they'll sit around and try to tell you wearing a thobe is making a mockery. You in a thobe is a mockery of Islam to us. Fool, you don't even pray. You don't even pray, my dude. Wallahi. The man got it. One of the brothers who's a doctor. And I mean, he had them brothers feeling some type of way. He got up on the minbar. He got up on the minbar and spoke about this and said, Wallahi. He said, man, when we was kids, he's from Jordan. He's from Arab descent. Hafid of the Quran. He said, man, our parents, they didn't teach us how to pray. They didn't teach us how to practice Islam. They taught us memorize the Quran because it was part of the school curriculum when you went to school. Memorize Quran. They taught us how to fast for Ramadan, and they taught us how to make Hajj. Why? Because if you fast for Ramadan properly and you stand during the night behind somebody that's leading you in prayer, then you're forgiven for everything you did all year. So he said this. Or you go to Hajj every year. And that way you make Hajj, you come out sinless like a brand new baby. He said some of us is grown men and we still can't even pray on our own. Because our parents didn't teach us how to pray. The whole thing was come stand and just do what we doing. So they just standing there. And then on top of that, some of them is Hafiz of the Quran. And go sit at home and can't. You a Hafiz of the Quran? And you can't even pray on your own? And you can't even pray on your own? And you can't even pray on your own? And y'all don't see these hadiths coming into fruition? You got the masjids, they got a Quran class, $75 a month, $150 a month. Quran class. I remember my daughter was a shorty. Oh, okay, y'all got some Quran classes, huh? Take my daughter up there, man. How much the Quran classes? They $75. What these Quran classes consist of? We teaching them how to memorize the short surahs in the back. Y'all explaining the Arabic? We don't even speak Arabic. We don't understand Arabic. We speak Urdu. How is this a Quran class? That sounds like some good marketing. It sounds like some good marketing. So you know what I'm saying? When you go and look into the sciences of the Quran and start to understand the sciences of the Quran, you got to be very careful of a slippery slope, because not only is this hadith coming into fruition, people teaching people the minhaj of becoming like the individuals that these hadiths is talking about. Is that can we say that's a bid'ah in the minhaj? Can that at least be said? Because everybody always want to talk about who's an innovator, and I'm not calling anybody an innovator. I'm being very careful with my words. But something is going on with this minhaj when a Quran class has absolutely nothing to do with learning how to implement the Quran in your everyday life. The ayahs being explained with tafsirs. There's something seriously wrong with that. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.